Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the course up to this point. Right now, real quick before we dive into the next module, I want to go ahead and give you a quick heads up on something. So one thing that people always want to know is what particular tools are you using to be more effective, to get more deals done, to be more efficient when practicing business development. So I went ahead and created this BD Insiders kit that includes within there my toolkit of tools that I use, and just to kind of show you what that looks like. There's just a ton of different things in here, how I use them, and all types of things that are going to make you more efficient and get more deals, more meetings. And so if this is something that you want, I update it regularly on my site, which is Lifelong Learner. So if you go ahead and go to lifelonglearner.com/BD Insiders, you can get access to this kit that contains all my favorite tools and apps, how I use them, how I'm more productive with them, as well as some other good free stuff. So again, that is lifelonglearner.com/BD Insiders, and you can go ahead and get access to all that stuff. Okay, so let's talk cold emailing. When do you use a cold email? Only when you can't get an introduction from a mutually warm connection do you want to use a cold email. That's not to say that cold emails can't work frequently, but it's just, again, always best to go in through a warm introduction if you can, due to the higher response rate and additional context that provides. Now, before we go into very specific tactical ways to write effective cold emails, I want to talk about what I think is the best mindset to take when writing these. And I really I really think that the best thing you can do is try to emulate copywriting. And if you're not familiar with copywriting, it's essentially people who focus on sequencing words in such a way that people take the action that you want them to take. So in this instance, the action that what we want people to take is to reply to our email and hopefully agree to a meeting or a follow-up call or whatever it may be. So the way that copywriters think when they're writing ad copy is that the goal of the headline, first and foremost, should be to get somebody to read the next sentence. Guess what? The goal of that next sentence is to read the sentence after that. And I think the same framework should be applied when we're writing emails. So the goal of the subject line is to get somebody's attention so that they open the email up and read that first sentence. And guess what? After they read the first sentence, the goal of that sentence is to get them to read the second sentence, and so on and so forth. Something else that you should take into consideration when crafting your subject line is the environment that you're competing in. For a lot of these big time executives, whether they're in the marketing department, the biz dev department, whatever it may be, these people are getting literally hundreds of emails a day. And the people they're getting emails from are probably from people that they already know. So you're competing for their attention as somebody that they don't know with this growing body of colleagues that they already have. Why this is important is that you cannot make it difficult for them to understand why you're reaching out to them. The harder it is for somebody to figure out why you're trying to get their attention, the less likely they're going to respond. And this is because generally people want to focus on what they know is important, and generally they just opt for the path of least resistance. So this is why I think it's a best practice to convey exactly why you're reaching out in the subject line. You don't want to make it seem like a lot of work for somebody to figure this out. Okay, so I know the goal of the subject line is to get somebody to open the email and read the first sentence. And I know that I should be incredibly direct so they know exactly why I'm reaching out. But what specifically should you be focusing on? Another excellent lesson that we can take from copywriting is the focus on appealing to an individual's desire. And this kind of treads the battle of feature versus pain. A huge mistake that I see a lot of people make is try to grab somebody's attention by bringing up a feature. So a perfect example would be our new product automates syndication of your social media properties. Okay, that's cool, but why is that important to me? It's important because it solves the pain of something taking a lot of time to do, or potentially costing your company a lot of money because you have to have 3 people do what one person could be doing with a tool that automates syndication. So generally, it's a best practice to always focus on the desire or the pain that it solves instead of the feature. Another important principle that is borrowed from copywriting is the notion of audience awareness. So how much does your audience that you're writing to know about your product and company? If somebody knows everything about your product and is basically deciding whether or not they want to do a deal with you or they want to buy from you, you're going to communicate to them very differently than you communicate to somebody who's not an early tech adopter or may never have heard of your product. So you need to tailor your message to the perceived awareness of the audience you're reaching out to. And a huge mistake I see here is just the lack of awareness about what vocabulary to use. If I was talking to a small business and started using words like API, they would have no idea what I was talking about. However, to somebody like a product manager at a tech company, API is basically their native language. So it's important to make sure that you're calibrating your message and vocabulary with the education and awareness of the audience that you're writing to. If you don't do this, people are going to be less likely to respond. So let's talk about some good subject line frameworks. One that I like in particular is just simply whatever value that you can drive with the partnership for whatever part of the prospect's business you're optimizing. So this could be their website, this could be their app, this could be their customer's experience, this could be their revenue, whatever it is. So let's look at some examples. Drive additional comments on your site. So the value add is your ability to help them drive additional engagement, and where you're going to be doing that is on their site. Another one could be generate more calls from your online listings. So the value add is generating more calls, and the place that you're going to do that is their online listings. Now, you'll see 2 bullet point titles, subject line titles under here. And what these are what functionally this might look like. So menu content for your site. Well, is the menu content the function, literally the thing that I can add, or is it appealing to the desire or pain? The desire of having additional content on the site is driving engagement, getting additional users, getting additional page views, whatever. But functionally, the way to do that is menu content. So personally, although both can work, and I have seen both work, I like to, again, appeal to the desire here. So instead of saying menu content for your site, I might say additional user actions on your dining pages or whatever it is. And the same goes for if the way that I was helping businesses generate more calls from their online listings was displaying photos is functionally how I would do this. But the actual desire that they want is from having the additional content is more phone calls to their business, or even more customers in the store if you want to get more specific. Another very similar framework that I like, and you can just reposition it, is just the value that you add and your company name. And this is good to use if somebody is somewhat familiar in the space. So you could say, if I was reaching out from Discuss, which is a comment platform, and I saw a major blog that was currently not using us, maybe they were just using WordPress comments, I could just say, drive comments on your site, Discuss. And again, it's the value add, then the company name that you're writing from. And just to kind of show you what functionally that might look like, just to point out the difference, comment widget for your site, Discuss. I personally, again, I think if I'm looking at these 2 headlines right now, I like the top one better because A, it appeals to my desire, and B, it also is a little bit more curious. If I've decided in advance that I don't want a comment widget on my site, then I'm going to immediately discount this email. However, if somebody says drive comments, maybe that could be some type of picture optimization. Maybe it could be a tool that I've never heard of. So that might inspire somebody to open the email that might have otherwise never have done that. So let's look at some examples of what I consider to be bad subject lines that I've seen frequently in the field. Your help. This does not appear to be driving value to the prospect's life when they read this. This is basically asking for something. This might even be insinuating that they need to do work, which again, people generally opt for the path of least resistance. So that doesn't make me want to open that email at all. Hey is non-descriptive. I have no reason that I should open this. Honestly, it looks like it could be one of those spam emails that contains a virus. Your company name, this kind of goes back to audience awareness. If somebody's maybe heard of your company and is foaming at the mouth to work with you, that could be interesting. But just stating your company name doesn't really appeal to any desire, doesn't appeal to any pain that you can help solve. I have no idea why I should open this email. It's all about you instead of about the prospect. Again, appending this to a way which you can drive value might make sense, but just by itself isn't really all that appealing. Opportunity, this isn't descriptive enough. I guess it might appeal to something, but is this an opportunity for me to join a pickup basketball league, or is this a way that you're going to help my business grow? I don't know. And quite frankly, I have 50 other emails I have to get to, so I'm just going to continue moving on when I see this. Getting together. This basically is implying that somebody should give you their time before you've proven to them that you're worth giving their time for. I think that this is a common assumption that I see a lot, is that people just think that other people should give them their time before they've proven their value and the value that they can drive. And you never want to make this assumption. It can actually really turn people off. Connecting, again, it's not really descriptive enough. I don't know if this is for personal networking. I don't know if this is for something very specific that I'm looking for. It just is very vague to me, which means that I'm not going to assign a high importance to it. Touching base, again, not descriptive enough. I have no context here. Why should I touch base with you? This is some type of email that I often get from like recruiters, so you're falling into a potential bucket there. Not necessarily a strong subject line. Do you have time this week? This is a little more direct, but again, it's assuming that you've proven your value to somebody else. And before anybody's going to give you their time, you need to convince them that you're going to be able to drive value for their business. So you don't want to assume that in the subject line like this. This is just a little presumptive and can actually turn somebody off. Okay, so it's not to say that any of these subject lines can't work. It's just that I think that you can do a whole lot better. And this course is about giving you the best information, not information that may or may not work. What about question subject lines? Does it ever make sense to ask a question in the subject line to maybe inspire curiosity to get somebody to open the email? Well, these can definitely work, again, because they inspire curiosity. But if you do this, you need to pay close attention to the words and what you're asking. So a good example would be, is driving more traffic a focus right now? This is a good example because it gets right to the point of why you're reaching out. If somebody's interested in driving more traffic to their website, guess what? They're going to read this email. If somebody's not interested in that, they probably aren't going to read the email. But if they're not interested in what you're having to offer, then that's a good thing because you don't waste your time on somebody who isn't ever going to be a potential deal or partnership for you. A bad subject line that uses a question. Why don't you have this? Now, I bring this up because a subject line like this might get somebody to open the email, but it just comes off as too internet marketing. And in the context of business development for startups, internet marketing headlines just don't kind of give off the right vibe. You're looking to establish a long-term business relationship with somebody, a relationship where both parties trust each other, even a friendship in some instances. And this kind of direct internet marketing headline just kind of starts the relationship off on the wrong foot. So generally, if you're going to use a question, I think the best thing you can do is be very specific so that people know exactly why you're reaching out, and if this is interesting to them, there's a high likelihood of them responding. Okay, let's talk about the best way to address the prospects. And this is the first thing that they're going to see after they open the email because you just wrote an awesome subject line. Generally, I like to just say hi in the prospect's first name, or maybe even some cases, hey. They seem really friendly in their picture on LinkedIn or wherever I saw them. Things that I don't think are best practices. Not having any formal address. So just going directly into a sentence. Hey, have you seen this? Hey, I wanted to touch base. This is not an email to an old-time friend. This is an email to somebody who has never met you. So that type of casual air is not necessarily something that is appropriate at this point. To whom this may concern or dear. This is incredibly formal, and people that use this type of language just don't come off as very familiar or fun or like somebody that I'd want to particularly hop on a phone call with. So I generally just go pretty informal and just say hey and the prospect's first name. Now, one mistake that I see all the time is messing up the naming convention of the prospect. See, a lot of times on LinkedIn, people state their proper full name instead of what their friends and colleagues call them. And again, you want to come from a place of familiarity. This is not attendance in first grade math class. You want to convey in the address the name that the friends and colleagues call them. So how can we make sure that we do this? Well, there's a ton of places online where you can find what somebody's proper naming convention is. Recommendations on a prospect's LinkedIn profile, as well as social profiles that are publicly available like Twitter and Facebook, and even their personal blog, which you can sometimes get by Googling somebody, are all excellent places to figure out what's the name that their friends and colleagues call them. You can even use that tool Reportive at reportive.com, which was mentioned earlier in how to find email addresses. Let me just show you what a LinkedIn recommendation looks like in case you've never seen one. So this is my friend, Pat McGrath. His formal name that is probably on his birth certificate and nowhere else is Patrick. But if I go down and look in the recommendation by a product designer at his previous company, OkCupid, you can see very evidently that people that know him well call him Pat. So in this instance, if I was writing Pat a cold email and I saw this, it would be much, much better to say, hi, Pat, instead of hi, Patrick, because again, I want to come from a place of familiarity. Let's go over some cold email rules of thumb now that we've covered the subject line and the address. This is going to be much more focused on the body content of the email. Number one, keep it short and sweet. I say cold emails are ideally 3 sentences, 4 maximum. If you write somebody a Bill Shakespeare novel, it's just going to look like a ton of work to read, and why should somebody read an email that long, or at least read it closely and attentively, to somebody they don't know? The shorter and sweeter and impactful you can make it, the higher likelihood that somebody is going to respond. Number 2, use language and an approach that is conversational or as a matter of fact. Now, this advice might be a little unconventional, so you could be asking yourself right now, Scott, why should I use a conversational tone in an email that is to somebody that I've never even met before? The first reason is the bucket theory. Generally, people put other people into buckets according to how they behave. When it comes to cold emails, most people out there are sending emails that read things like, hi, my name is this, and I do business at this, and I'm looking to give you this. And 99% of those emails, at least in my experience, don't provide any value to me. So I don't want to write an email that comes off like that because I think that people will immediately put me into a bucket of somebody that's not going to provide value to their life. Again, this is the same reason that I don't send LinkedIn messages, because primarily the LinkedIn messages I get are from recruiters or people trying to sell me something that are low value. So you don't want to put yourself in the bucket of people that write bad emails. Number 2, people do business with people they like. If you sound like a fun and interesting guy in an email, or even just somebody that another person would want to have a conversation with at a bar, they're going to be more likely to respond. When I get an email from somebody who sounds extremely formal and strict and just really boring, that doesn't exactly incentivize me to want to hop on the phone call with this person. And again, this is another reason why a conversational tone that a normal, fun person would take is a good strategy. Number 3, you want to avoid signaling that you're running down a hit list. Rigid, impersonal emails that look like they're just straight out of a template. Number 3, you want to avoid signaling that you're running down a hit list. Rigid, impersonal emails that look like they're just straight out of a template give off the impression that you are sitting there in front of a giant spreadsheet just firing these off, hoping people respond. Compare this with a conversational, personal email that just looks like you just happen to find something that compelled you to send an email to another person. It's a totally different feel. And that conversational appeal is going to result in a higher likelihood of response than somebody who just is firing off emails on a hit list, spraying and praying, hoping that one hits. Now let's look at an example of what I mean by conversational language. Here's a good example. Hi, John. I noticed that whatever happened and I wanted to send you an email just to say, hey. I almost like to just think about like bar talk. If I was approaching a stranger at a bar and said, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I did all of these cool things, and I've raised money from this company, and I went to this college, and people like me, I would be like, wow, this person's a tool. Why? I don't want them to talk to me. But if somebody came up to me and say, hey, I just wanted to say I really like your shoes, and I'm Scott, I'd be a little bit more open to talking to that person who's just having a casual conversation. So this is the type of feel that I like to go for in emails, and I've had a ton of success with. Now, a bad example of language is, we've recently launched a transformative iterative platform. I'm reaching out to present an opportunity that this is not casual conversation. I do not want to hop on a phone call with the person who speaks this rigidly, and quite frankly, it's just really not that personal. We alluded to this briefly earlier, but just to highlight it again, you want to make sure that you avoid internet marketer speak throughout your emails. It's just not appropriate in the BD context where you're trying to develop long-term bonds with people. So things like one-time limited offers, exclusive time-sensitive windows, free access, even if these things are true, you want to avoid writing these things in an initial cold email just because it comes off as like somebody hawking something, not necessarily like somebody I want to build a long-term relationship with. Okay, let's move on to the third cold email rule of thumb. And it's pretty simple. Spare the prospect the declaration. So what I mean by this is, hi, my name is Scott Britton and I do business development for Single Platform. We raised $4 million from top venture capitalists. This is just a waste of a sentence because it's not relevant to the prospect and the value that you're going to drive to them. Anybody who has half a brain can see what company you work for by the email address that you email them from, as well as your signature and what your position is. So again, the size of the email is critical because it can appear like something is a lot of work to read versus a little work. And if you spend 2 to 3 sentences declaring and announcing yourself, it's just going to make your email look longer and decrease the chance of somebody actually reading it. So, don't be a town crier and say the old, my name is this and this is my job and we've done these cool things. This is such a common habit amongst cold emailing that I see, and it just isn't not a good use of time. We're going to go over exactly what you should say and said very shortly, but just think about this. Is this as interesting to somebody as talking immediately about the value that you can drive my company? I don't really think so. You want to find a unique way to display that you've done your homework and that this isn't a canned email, again, coming from a hit list of 500 prospects. One of my favorite ways to do this is to take advantage of hyperlinks. So let's talk a little bit more about the hyperlink. Hyperlinks allow you to do a couple things. One, it makes it easy for you to display that they have a problem you can solve. So one of the things that I really like to do is say something like, hey, I noticed that you guys currently aren't doing this. And then hyperlink to that particular instance on one of their properties, whether it's a web page, a social media profile, whatever it is that I can optimize. Make it easy for them to click and verify that they, in fact, do have a problem. The second thing that a hyperlink does is it signals that they're not just one of 500 canned emails. Even if they are, the fact that you went out of your way to link to something and highlight it shows that you're not just copying and pasting, and that this is an email that is unique to them. If it still seems a little vague about how you should use hyperlinks, I'm going to be displaying my favorite way to do this in just a few minutes, so just sit tight. Okay, cold email rule of thumb number 5. Be mindful of spacing. Spacing your sentences out in an email just makes it easier to read and appear less daunting. When I see an email that has no spacing whatsoever and is 6 or 7 sentences long, it just feels like a pain to read. Let's just compare 2 emails just to see what I'm talking about. So here's an example of an email with nice spacing. It's 3 sentences long and has a space between each sentence. This is the same exact email as the one before. Which one's harder to read? Which one feels like it would just be more of a strain on you to read in full? My bet is the second one, the one that we're looking at right now. So for this reason, you just want to remove all friction to somebody actually reading the email, and just, a few proper line spaces is one way to accomplish this. A little caveat here that hopefully most people are already practicing, but if they're not, I wanted to bring up, is that when you're sending business emails out, you always want to use your company email address and include a signature. It's just the professional thing to do. Now, components of a signature can vary according to what you think is important in your business, but generally I like to include my name, my title, the company, the phone number that I can be reached at, both in the office and mobily. And if you have any positive press, that's always a good thing to include as well, because somebody may have never heard of your company before, and all of a sudden, if they scroll down and see that you're mentioned in places like Forbes, Business Week, The Next Web, TechCrunch, whatever it is, it brings some legitimacy to the cold email. So I've gotten this question about exclamation points and smiley faces in in-person workshops I've done, so I thought I'd bring it to everyone's attention here. Generally, the use of exclamation and smiley faces should be calibrated with the context of the email. If your cold email is coming on the heels of an article in TechCrunch or some other publication that shines an incredible light on the company, it might make sense to use an exclamation point. If you're just reaching out blindly just to try to get a meeting, and there's no particular compelling event or something that happened, then most emails can do without exclamation points and smiley faces. And if I do include one of these elements, which I, again, usually don't, I try to limit it to 1 per email. And that's in the context of both cold emails and emails where I already have rapport with somebody. Smiley faces, just to shine even more light on those, because they can be a little bit more dangerous. Unless you have rapport with somebody, you generally want to avoid these. And even when you do have rapport, you should calibrate these with the demeanor and relationship of the person on the other side. If you have a great, friendly, fun relationship with the person that you're emailing, smiley face away. However, if this person's really serious, they might take the smiley face the wrong way. So generally, avoid and calibrate when it comes to smiley faces. Okay, so right now what I want to do is condense all of these cold email rule of thumbs into my favorite cold email formula, and I call it the bandage email. And I've used this for literally hundreds, if not thousands of emails, and had just an incredible response rate. So the formula goes as follows. What you want to do at a high level is irritate the wound early and then provide the bandage. Let me explain. So the first sentence, what you're trying to accomplish is basically to glaringly identify the thing which can be optimized early on so that you get their attention. After you've done this, you want to follow this statement by introducing your solution or ability to resolve the shortcoming. Let's look at a very specific email just to kind of shed some more insight into what exactly I mean. Okay, let's give this a read. And I guess as just a some context here, I'll give a specific example and use cookie retargeting software as the thing that I'm trying to pitch. But where I have solution in the brackets can be whatever your benefit is that you're going for. Okay. Hi prospect, I noticed that your site currently isn't running cookie retargeting software, which typically increases conversions by 20%. Implementing a retargeting solution is actually something that we help companies like yours with all the time. In fact, it's something that we do for companies like X, Y, and Z competitors. If there's a day next week when you have 10 minutes, I'd love to connect so that we can talk about getting this taken care of for you. Okay, let's go ahead and dig into this. So the first sentence is about irritating the wound. Again, you want to get their attention, and the goal of the first sentence is to get them to read the second sentence. So I noticed that your site currently isn't whatever thing that you can optimize. You want to point it out and make it very easy for them to verify this by using a hyperlink. And then you want to give them a reason why it's important that their site has to have that thing. So here I said, which typically increases conversions by 20%. It doesn't have to be, although it's more powerful when there's some type of quantitative measure in here, like increasing conversions by 20%. You could say something like, which typically drives engagement, or which typically results in enhanced user experience, whatever it is. You want to give them a reason there. Okay, first sentence. So that's the wound. You've irritated it. You've got their attention. Now it's time to introduce the solution. The second block of text does two things. First, it lets them know that you can provide the bandage to this wound that you just brought up. So saying implementing this is actually something that we help with companies like yours all the time is essentially that. The next thing you want to do, if you can, is basically point to some social proof. So in fact, it's what we do for companies like X, Y, and Z. All of a sudden might raise an eyebrow and say, oh wow, these other people are doing this. I guess this really is a best practice that I should take into consideration. Now, after you've done this, you've irritated the wound, offered up the solution and the fact that you can help them with it. Now it's time to basically ask for some time. And I like to do this originally in a very casual way. There's a day next week when you have 10 minutes, I'd love to connect so we can talk about getting this taken care of for you. I love using the phrase getting this taken care of because it's totally congruent with the rest of this email, right? It makes it appear like this is an obvious thing that other people are doing and you need to get this taken care of because it's a best practice. This is a very subtle nuance, but very, very powerful thing to communicate. Because when somebody feels like they're just not implementing an obvious best practice, there's a sense of urgency there that often is harder to communicate when you're just flat out asking for somebody's time. So let's go ahead and look at an example of when I did this and the positive results. Because I believe in being open and transparent at all levels of business, especially when it helps other people learn. So I sent this email to a big time prospective partner that I wanted to do an API integration with so that they would take our menu content. First part, let's go ahead and see how I irritated the wound. Hi Andrew, I want to touch base because I noticed there's no menu content for your restaurant listings. Without this content, you're missing out on additional page views, engagement, and SEO benefits. You're also missing out on itemized search, which I thought you might be interested in and is something we power in the YP mobile app and soon Avatar, which are both competitors. Some example implementations with our free API can be seen here by clicking the menu. New York Times, Foursquare, City Seeker. Would love to connect with you or the appropriate person when you have a few minutes. Andrew gets back to me. Definitely interested in having a discussion. Let me introduce you to Evan, who is the member of my team focused on whatever their initiative is, driving on-site engagement, and the connection is made. So let's just break this down real quick. The first two paragraphs, and I kind of didn't take my own medicine here in that it is a little bit long, but it worked. And the reason I think it worked is because the first thing I started was irritating the wound. So I noticed there's no menu content. Without this content, you're missing this. These other people who you're competing with have it. Then after that, I introduced the solution. This is something that we actually power for these people. And you can actually see exactly what this looks like here, here, and here. If you have time, no pressure, because again, I'm after a long-term business development relationship. I'd love to connect with you or the appropriate person when you have a few minutes. After this email, I got connected with Evan and the rest of the right people at this company, and eventually we ended up doing an awesome deal with them. But it all started out with just writing one simple, effective email, which just kind of shows you the power that understanding how to cold email effectively can have. Now, there's a lot of people out there that say that the best practice for finishing an email is a direct call to action. And you'll notice that in the Bandage email formula, I actually didn't do this. I finished the email by saying, if there's a day next week when you have 10 minutes, I'd love to connect so we can talk about getting this taken care of for you. If you compare this to a direct call to action, maybe something like, do you have 10 minutes next week to discuss? It's a little different. Interestingly enough, I just wanted to highlight that I've actually tested with both of these and didn't notice a statistically significant difference in either direction in terms of response rate. So if you feel strongly about the direct call to action, by all means, go for it. I just wanted to highlight in my personal experience, I found that by the time that people have already gotten to the last sentence of your email, they've made a decision whether they're going to respond to you or not, which is why I think the first, second, third subject line are the most important things. So that's my personal opinion. But if you insist on doing a direct call to action, by all means, you go ahead. I don't think there's any harm that can be done there. I want to real quick talk about another cold email formula I've seen work, and I actually got this from a guy by the name of Brian Kreuzberger, who has a site called Breakthrough Email. Basically, what he does is try to leverage the internal pressure to respond by emailing multiple people. So essentially, the structure of this email is that you can pick 3 to 4 people who are likely related to a particular decision or initiative that you're trying to push through. And essentially email them all the same email, just switching out the names, indicating that you're interested in connecting with them about a particular initiative. This way, the email doesn't get put by the wayside, and one of them internally feels necessary to respond to the email. So an example would be, hey John, I'm ready to connect with the person who manages whatever the initiative you're looking to connect with. In this pursuit, I've also written to Steve, another contact, and contact 3. Here you go into why you want to connect to them. I want to connect about how my company blank can help improve whatever value you drive with our solution. This is something we're currently accomplishing with Social Proof 1, Social Proof 2, and Social Proof 3. Do you have some time early next week to discuss? Now, you take this email and all you do is switch the names. So here you see I've switched Steve and John and send this exact email to 3 to 4 people. And the hope is that collectively these people realize that you're trying to connect them about a certain thing and somebody feels the pressure internally to respond. Now, the one thing that this email does, which I think is great, is it acknowledges the fact that you're emailing multiple people. And it does that by saying, in this pursuit, I've also written to this person, and this person. Because honestly, one of the last things you want to do is cold email and carpet bomb a bunch of people without indicating that that's something you're doing. It just looks bad. It looks like you're misinformed. And honestly, it looks spammy. So if you're going to email multiple people at a company, make sure to acknowledge that instead of just BCC or CC multiple people, or even just doing a bunch of separate 2 emails. If you're going to email multiple people at the same company at the same time, you want to let them know because they're all going to talk to each other and it just comes off like you're spraying and praying. Okay, let's talk about another strategy that can work amazingly well for getting responses for cold emails. And what I call this is just creating an internal referral for yourself. The idea here is to basically call above someone. So call someone's boss and then get that person's boss to indicate that you should talk to the person that you're trying to reach. And that person's, again, the initial stakeholder on your hit list. And the reason that you want to do this is because when somebody's boss says that they should talk to you, that all of a sudden provides a sense of urgency around the cold email that you wouldn't have gotten before, which optimizes the likelihood that somebody is going to respond to you. So let's talk about how to actually accomplish this. Step one, go on LinkedIn and figure out who the initial stakeholder's boss is. So for example, if you're trying to reach the director of marketing, their boss would likely be the VP of marketing. And a great place to find this information is that section on the right-hand side when you're viewing your stakeholder's profile called People Also Viewed. Often this is people's boss as well as the people that work under that particular person. Once you've identified the name of that person, you're going to want to call the company and do an informational cold call to the boss's office. Now, when you get through to their office, whether it's the secretary or whether it's the actual boss themselves, the main question that you want to ask is, do you know who manages whatever initiative you're looking to connect with the full knowledge that it's the person below them that likely manages it? And what you're hoping for is that that boss says, oh yeah, it's so-and-so's name, whoever the name of the person who you've indicated is the stakeholder for that particular initiative. Now, once you've got a verbal referral, you want to reference that phone dialogue referral within the email in both the subject line and the body. And when you do this, all of a sudden there's a much higher level of importance to that email because somebody that person knows and trusts and is responsible to report to, all of a sudden has vouched that they need to talk to you. The end result is an increased response rate for you. So let's go ahead and actually see how this looks. If I was trying to connect with the person who manages social media marketing and I called upon the CMO's office to get that internal referral, what I'll do is in the email title, I'll literally just say something like social media marketing via the referral person's name. And then in that first sentence, I'll do it again and say, hi, blank, whatever the stakeholder's name is. Joe CMO, who's the boss, directed me to you as the point person for all things social media. And then I'll just go into the spiel about why it's relevant to connect with me. The most important thing is that you basically have that sense of urgency in the email by referencing the person that they work for in both the title and the first sentence. Now, you might be saying, well, what happens if I can't get the boss on phone? I mean, it's hard to reach CMOs, VPs, even directors. It's hard to get them on the phone. How can I leverage a strategy? Well, the good news is that if you even just get through to somebody's office, that can still be very powerful. Let's say you go in and you speak to a secretary or maybe their assistant. All you do is change the first sentence from Joe CMO directed to you as the point person for all things, whatever the initiative is, to someone from the office of Joe CMO. The bottom line is this person is going to see their boss's name. Your email is going to seem much more important, and they're going to respond to you because they have a higher incentive to respond to an email that is associated with their boss than to blow it off completely. And a lot of times people will be timid about asking their boss whether this is something that's very important. They'd prefer to just do it because it's lower risk. So this is the art of the internal referral. Another tactic that's worked very well for me is the personalized screencast. And I especially like this when trying to get somebody who's really, really hard to reach to respond to me. And I basically apply it within the Bandage email framework. So the idea is that you want to irritate the wound by taking a screencast on your computer of the thing that can be optimized by your solution and then emailing that person a link. And in the first sentence, just indicating that you saw something that was a shortcoming and that you'd like to talk to them about how you can fix it. And instead of just using a hyperlink, you actually link to a video of you talking about it and be a little bit explicit about it. So in this example, I went ahead and did a personalized screencast for my friend Dan, trying to get him to use a mobile optimized WordPress plugin. And it's just basically the same formula as the Bandage email, where I notice your blog isn't currently mobile optimized, linking to his blog, and then basically explicitly linking to my video site review of how this could be improved. And I'll even throw a picture in there by just taking a quick screenshot of the screencast and copy and paste that into the email. And then below the screencast, and by the way, that is a link to an externally hosted video on YouTube that's unlisted. And then below that, it's basically providing the solution and again, incentive why they should connect with you. So WordPress Touch is a plugin that actually mobily optimizes WordPress blogs to enhance the viewing experience for your readers on phones and tablets. When you have a few minutes, would love to connect to get this taken care of. So exactly the same framework as the Bandage email, except this time I'm actually linking to a personalized screencast. And there's a few different softwares out there you can use to accomplish this. If you're on a Mac, I recommend ScreenFlow. Camtasia is great for PCs, and if you even want to go iPad and be able to enhance the video with annotations using your finger, I highly recommend the app Contacts on the iPad. And again, I think that the best place to host this, although you can do it on paid services like Wistia, is just an unlisted YouTube link. And make sure that when you do in the title, when you do link out to this, to indicate that it's a private video. And you can also do that in the email as well. Even when you use some of the most powerful words in a cold email, sometimes it just isn't enough to grab a prospect's attention. One cool thing you can do is take advantage of the fact that you can manipulate HTML on every single website to actually demonstrate what an integration or relationship might look like. And the two tools that you can use to do this, depending upon whether you use Firefox as a browser or Google Chrome, is Firebug, which is for Firefox, or Inspect Element on Google Chrome. And basically what these tools allow you to do is on any page, actually change the content and take a screenshot of it so that you can show people what a relationship would look like. So an example that comes to mind is when I was trying to convince gyms to work with us to basically display their online class schedules across our publisher network. Here's an example of Equinox, one of the gyms I had contacted on Foursquare. And basically what I did was, using Photoshop and some custom HTML, manipulated the page so that it showed a class schedules and amenities, and then actually changed what was a restaurant menu, just change the text, manipulating the on-page HTML using Firebug to show a class schedule instead of a dining menu. And I changed the title of the menu. On the right-hand side, instead of appetizers, it says classes and amenity and schedule. And basically took a picture of this and attached it to an email saying, hey, I'd love to connect. We're starting to work with gyms to display their class schedules on our most popular publisher sites. This is an example of what I had in mind for you guys. And it worked, because a lot of these people, you can talk in a few sentences about what the benefit might be, but them actually seeing what a relationship might look like can be incredibly powerful. So let's go ahead and show you exactly how to do this. Okay, so let's take a look at how you can use custom HTML using its Inspect Element on Google Chrome to manipulate how a page looks. So first thing I'm going to do is just do a right click, go to Inspect Element, and that now surfaces the HTML of the page. And I'll just click Control F or whatever your find function is. And let's say that I want to change the main menu text here. So I search main menu, and here it is. And I can simply double click that. And let's just put BD Playbook is awesome. Awesome. And click enter. And now this page has that text. And I'm not going to do this for the entire page, but you can see how pretty much any page with HTML you can manipulate so in order to display something different and emulate what could be a partnership between your company and another one. And what you do is after you've manipulated the page to more or less demonstrate what a partnership would look like, you just take a screenshot of it like this and append it to an email, stating something as simple as, I've attached a screenshot to give you an idea of how we're helping similar companies drive clients to classes for this particular Equinox example, or even hey, I just wanted to show you what this might look like, is just a simple thing you can say to bring attention to this and ultimately get them to look at the attachment. I even like occasionally doing a PS just because I think that can be kind of noticeable, and saying something like, PS attaches a screenshot that should give you an idea of how we're helping similar companies or how we can help your company drive clients to classes, or whatever the particular value that an integration would offer. Another effective cold email strategy that's not as easy to pull off because some of it's out of your control is an event-based cold email. So basically, anytime you see a timely article about somebody that's on your hit list, maybe they just raised money, maybe they just had a new integration come out, whatever it is, that's an opportunity for you to basically reach out to that person. Other examples are conferences, social media activity. So you saw something on their Twitter handle or Facebook page that you really like. These are all excellent reasons to just reach out and ping them, specifically referencing the event that you just saw. So if it was an article, you could have a title that said, congrats, whatever the title of the article is. Or if you saw that they were going to a conference coming up, connecting at X conference, social media reference, tweet on whatever they tweeted about. And basically, the first sentence of this email is, hey, I just saw this great article, congratulations. I wanted to connect because, or hey, I saw you're going to this conference. My company X is going to be there too. I want to connect because, and you're basically just piggybacking on the heels of this public event to get in touch with this person because everybody's excited to talk about something good that's happening, or even just talk to somebody that has demonstrated that this is a very personalized email due to the specific timing around an event. So these can definitely work, and you can even, monitor certain things like popular industry publications, the social media handles of the people you're looking to reach out to, just to try to identify these specific instances. Okay, so at this point, you should have an idea of some frameworks and formulas you can use to write effective cold emails that get responses. Let's talk about some things that you should generally avoid with initial cold emails. Number one, attaching a deck or a PDF to the cold email that basically is trying to convince somebody to do a partnership with you. A static email attachment is never going to be able to pitch your product and talk about the value it can provide, as well as disarm objections, as well as you'll be able to in person or over the phone. And when you give somebody a PDF that explains all the different features of your service, oftentimes people will just look at it, make an evaluation, and decide that, you know what, maybe this isn't the best fit for us now. So you want to avoid those circumstances from happening by never, ever, ever letting the decision be made through an email attachment. So generally, never attach a deck to the cold email because, again, it's never going to be able to pitch as well as you can yourself and address objections, of course. Number two, don't use vocabulary that your prospect doesn't understand. We talked about this earlier, but it's important to calibrate with the person on the other end. If I was going to somebody and saying words like API, CMS, sales marketing automation software, because that makes sense to my colleagues, but it has no relevance to the person that I'm trying to sell to because they don't know what it means, I'm going to have a really tough time trying to get them to respond. If you're unsure about the audience awareness and understanding that they have of the vocabulary for your particular product and or industry, always just err on the side of caution and try to avoid technical terms and instead maybe even dumb it down a little bit just by describing the function of what your product does instead of referring to the technical term. Another cold email don't is using things like all caps, highlighting, or underlining in initial cold emails. This is a cold email that I got, and it just does not look professional. It honestly, when I see this, I feel like somebody's yelling at me, and somebody that I don't even know. So you generally just want to avoid this. It's not a professional look. It makes me feel like this person doesn't think that I'm actually going to read what they wrote, which is kind of an inferior thing to object into a conversation. So avoid the use of all caps, highlighting, underlining, extreme uses of bolding. Just keep it simple and standard for an initial cold email. Number 4, you want to avoid proposing a coffee or lunch in an initial cold email. Before somebody commits their time to you, you have to prove to them that you're going to drive value. So in an initial cold email, before this person's gotten to know you, evaluated whether you can drive value to their company, it just isn't appropriate to ask for their time. Only after you have demonstrated to them that you're worthy of asking for their time in person should you propose a coffee or lunch. You never want to make an assumption, and this can actually turn a lot of people off. Number 5, assume that someone should speak with you immediately. Odds are that this person's life was going just fine before you decided to send them a cold email. So when you send something that makes it seem like it's incredibly urgent that you talk to them, it's just not very polite. There's not a lot of social tact here. Here's an example of, do you have time this afternoon? I don't even know this person, and they're asking me to rearrange my schedule and to get on the phone on a phone call with them this afternoon. Again, I don't know that this person is going to drive value to my life. They may think they are, but you know what? Guess what? They're trying to get in touch with me, so they have to work on my schedule. So generally, you want to avoid any instance of assuming that somebody should speak with you immediately, because whatever it is, it probably isn't that urgent. Okay, a last quick section that I wanted to cover in this cold email module is just phrases to avoid. And I'm just going to go through these very quickly, each phrase and why you should avoid it. Thanks in advance. Thanking somebody in advance is like saying, I'm not high value. It just doesn't come off as a very authoritative, strong thing to say. And not to say that you don't need to prove yourself, but thanks in advance just you're coming from a place of weakness. I hope all is well. This is just a phrase that isn't very additive. For somebody that you don't know, I would hope that you would hope all is well. I'd hope that you'd not wish bad things around them. I think that generally this is just a waste of a sentence. I thought I'd touch base too. You don't think to touch base. I want to touch base. I want to talk with you about this thing. Again, weak statement doesn't necessarily convey importance or urgency. Thanks for your consideration. At the end of an email, when somebody says thanks for your consideration, you're not coming off like you know that you provide value. It's almost like there's some type of sympathy or pity there. So you want to avoid saying that. Saying the words a major player in your industry or cryptically describing somebody else, it just comes off as kind of shady and internet marketing. If you're going to inject into the dialogue competitors, then name the competitors. Name the people that you work with, whoever it is. Don't be cryptic. It comes off as sketchy. And again, these people are vetting whether they want to build a long-term relationship with you. We talked about the address, but using a dear is very formal. It doesn't necessarily conjure feelings of familiarity, so you want to avoid that. And the same goes for something like sincerely yours. This is just really formal. People that say sincerely yours at the end of an email aren't necessarily people that sound like they're fun to get on a phone call with. They don't really feel familiar to me. It doesn't necessarily give the vibe of a fun, casual conversation. So you generally would be better suited just saying something like best. Okay, so these are just a few phrases you want to avoid. this wraps up the cold emailing section, and hopefully you learned a few good tricks here to optimize the chance of somebody responding to you.